It is currently July 4th here in America, and as you all should know, it is Independence Day for us. And I thought, what better way to celebrate Independence Day than to watch a video of an expat who uprooted from America and now is living in Great Britain today, or, now it's currently known as the UK, specifically London. Because I personally, as a traveler, I only know about visiting London. I don't know about expatting in London, okay? It might be a whole different experience. And granted, I only spent like a few days in London. As I was visiting the UK, I was hitting a myriad of places. So I think this video would be perfect for people who are interested in expatting in a country from America to a country that also speaks English, because I know it's very difficult learning a whole different language, especially when you're going to be living in that country your whole life. You might not even like the language of choice. So that's why, it's good to look at options that of countries that also speak English. And I think I ruffled some feathers in the last video. I talked about, in my Frankfurt video, it may not be in your best interest to actually learn German if you're expatting in Frankfurt, Germany. And I got some comments that were saying, it's probably, it's disrespectful to not learn the language of Germany if you're living there, or whichever country that you're going to. And I think this would be a good discussion to talk about in the comments today. Because personally, as a traveler, most places that I visited, they had English speakers there anyway. And when I'm thinking about it, when I'm thinking about here in America, I live in New York. When I go to Lexington Avenue and 125th Street, and I start sparking up a conversation with one of the Dominicans, I want to hear them saying "Que lo que pasó, mami." I don't want to hear them say "Yo, yes, sirski." Like, that's boring. I want to hear them talking in their own language. I don't need them speaking English. But yeah, talk about it in the comments. Let me know. I didn't realize this was such a controversial topic to even talk about. But it's interesting for discussion. As a traveler myself, it didn't even occur to me. It may be different when you're expatting to a country. That it probably is better to actually learn in depth the language. I suggest only like considering learning like beginner level language of the country that you're visiting. But yeah, let me know in the comments. And with that, let us get started with this video. This channel is called She Run the World. Yeah, let's listen to what this lady has to say.
London is a magical city that has so much to offer. It's especially great for Americans who want to move abroad but don't want to live somewhere with a language barrier. I moved here a little over 7 months ago now, and I am still absolutely in awe and in love with this city, but with everything good, there comes bad things as well. It's not all perfect, so let's dive into the pros and cons of living in London from an American's point of view. Start with the pros. The first one is pretty obvious. Big city life. There's always something happening. You can never be bored with the amount of restaurants to try, parks to hang out in, markets to shop in, not to mention the world-class sightseeing.
Yeah, in my visit to London, I was reminded a lot of New York. My first impressions were, London just wants to be like New York so bad. And when you visit to these big city locations, I'm always reminded a little bit of New York, because I think New York is the top standard of what cities try to be. And I think that in like most places, especially when I visited Boston, I visited Edinburgh. We'll get to that, but Edinburgh is not like so much like New York. It reminded more of like Harry Potter movies for some reason in Edinburgh. But yeah, let's continue.
Things and all the concerts and sporting events that are going on every single week. London is massive. I've lived in a ton of big cities. I mean, I grew up in LA. I lived in Chongqing, China for a year. That's home to 35 million people. I lived in the capital city of Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh City, for nearly a year. Prague, Austin, Texas, you name it. I'm obviously a big city person, but out of all the cities I've lived in, none are as big or have as much to do as London does, in my opinion. After 7 months, I am still constantly discovering new things, and I think that's why I love living here so much. Next,
Yeah, I think she's gonna be a good tool considering she lived in so many places. But it seems like she only lived in these places a year at a time. The only span of years that it seemed that she gave out was she lived in one Chinese country for a year. So I'm curious, did she actually learn Chinese while she was in those countries? Or maybe just like beginner level words. But this is about London, so let's get back into this.
we have the amount of culture, history, and diversity that London has, which is a lot. I know as Americans, it's so cool for us to visit anywhere in Europe just because of how old everything is and how much history it has. I mean, most of these things are older than our country even existing, so London is no different. London was originally called Londinium and was established by a civilian town by the Romans about 4 years after the invasion of 43 AD. 43 AD, that's incredibly old. We don't have anything that comes close to that in the States. And to piggyback off of that, I love walking around London and seeing the juxtaposition of new and old. You see all the ornate buildings built hundreds of years ago, the things I was just talking about, the history, and then right behind it, it's a brand new modern skyscraper.
Yeah, it's so cool coming across, the contrast between old buildings and new buildings. That's one thing I noticed about London, but I especially liked the old buildings. I don't know, I'm a bit of like in the traditionalist mindset when it comes to visiting cities. I like to see what the old traditional Gothic buildings looked like back in the day, that's why visiting the Queen was one of my favorite parts of visiting London. Although I don't think the Queen herself wasn't in the castle that we were visiting, but those like soldiers that are wearing like the red suits and the fur caps. Yeah, no, things like that fascinate me, especially with my ballet background. You get to in that dance genre, it is a lot of like historical context that you need to understand if you're taking dance history, and London was like a big pusher of that art form.
So cool to see how all the culture, history, and diversity melds together with the new and the modern. Next up, we have the amount of job opportunities. Of course, it's the biggest city in the UK, it's the capital, therefore it has the most job opportunities in the UK.
So yeah, job opportunities are especially important when you're expating. You can't really get a visa in a country unless you're financially stable in that country, you have proof of financial stability, or you have a job in that country. So let's see what she says about this.
Okay. Especially in the tech and international business sector, London is a phenomenal place to try and get a job. Also, a lot of American companies that have offices abroad will most likely have an office in London, and since there's no language barrier, it might be your easiest way of moving here if you're able to stay within your company and just transfer to their London office. Definitely something worth looking into. Next, we have a high standard of living. If you're coming from a Western civilization like the US, you will expect a certain standard of living or quality of life. Not everyone would be able to leave their cushy life in LA and move to somewhere like Chongqing, China, where there is absolutely no English spoken at all. Finding Western food is a huge challenge, and you have to squat to use the Eastern toilets. It's just different. It's not what some people.
Yeah, no. As I was saying before, it's an English-speaking country on the western side of the hemisphere, so a lot of the things are going to be reminding you of Western civilization. So that means high standard of living. So that's obviously going to come with a high cost of living. So let's see if she talks about that.
People would like if they grew up in the States or Western civilization. So moving to London, you will have a high standard of living. Things will be modern. You will have access to pretty much all the same foods that you're used to. I don't really think too many things will just completely shock you compared to living in a big city in Asia, which might have a lot of culture shocks for you. But just in case, make sure to check out this UK culture shock video so you are prepared. Next up, we have a great public transportation system. There is absolutely no need to have a car while living in London, which is great because it saves you money and a huge headache. London is so well connected through underground trains, overground trains, buses, boats, cable cars, you name it, they have it in their Transport for London system, or TfL.
Yeah, so it's basically like New York. You don't need a car in New York. And I'm finding more and more often that whenever you visit a country, you don't really need to bring a car yourself. Unless you're living like on the outskirts or like the country life, then I think it would be more important to consider getting a car. But I think this is a good tidbit for a lot of Americans because in most states, other than New York, it's common to be an owner of a car. But as she said, the public transportation is perfect in London. Even I myself, I took the subway there, and it was better than New York's subway. So, yeah, take that for what it's worth.
And you don't even need to go to a machine and buy a ticket or buy a transport card and top it up like you do in most big cities. You can just tap your bank card or Apple Pay and it charges you based on how many zones you travel. So it's super, super convenient if you're visiting London. You don't need to buy anything when you're here just for a few days, but even living here, it's so convenient. I always remembered having to go to the metro stations when I lived in China to top up my metro card with cash, and it was just such a hassle. So it's nice that I never have to worry about that here. I just tap my card and I hop on. And to piggyback off of this point for my last point in the pros column, there are so many travel opportunities around the UK and Europe because of how well connected it is and how big of a travel hub it is. You can get all the way up to Edinburgh, Scotland on a fast train in 4 hours, whereas driving would take you a little bit over 7 hours. You can hop on a train to Paris or Brussels and be there in 2 hours, Amsterdam in 4 hours. This is all city center to city center. And
Okay, I didn't know this part actually because when I was visiting Edinburgh, the way that I got to London was by plane. I didn't know you could actually take a train to actually get there. And that's one of the positives of living in a European country. It's like so connected to other European countries that it makes it easy and convenient to actually travel there. While in America, you can only really go to the States. You could go state to state, which, isn't as exciting in my opinion. But yeah, let's let her continue.
of course, everything else is just a short plane ride away, probably less than 3-ish hours. And you have 5 airports to choose from, all spread around London. And the amount of round trip flights I have seen to locations all around Europe for less than £30 is just insane. Like, why wouldn't you be traveling all the time? So the public transportation for your daily life in London is top notch, and any fun travels you want to do are also just as easy. Now it's time to move on.
Yeah, no, if you're in Europe, please, I beg of you, take advantage of the ability to travel to different countries. Because why not? Why not? It's convenient, and easy, it seems. Yeah, listen to what this lady says.
On to the cons. The biggest con is the high cost of living. Like I said before, it is a very high standard of living, but it comes at an extremely high cost. London has always been ranked as one of the 10 most expensive cities to live in the world. This is why so many people live outside of London and then commute in by train to go to work. But even train prices are super, super expensive. When I first got my job in London, I was still living in Brighton and I had to commute, and it would cost me about £50 round trip to get to work and would take 2 hours each way. But living within London is super expensive with the crazy.
Yeah, no, it's the same way in New York. A lot of people who say like they live in New York City, they're more talking about living around the area and they could easily get to New York. It's very expensive living in New York, obviously. Like this is one of the main reasons why people don't even have cars in New York City, is because the parking for cars is quite expensive if you want to keep a car, unless you have like your own parking garage amenity. in your apartment area, somewhere around the area. That's why there's like a lot of parking lots that charge you to park your car there. It's, it's not easy living in the city. Like doing anything in the city, yeah, it's pretty difficult.
Crazy rent prices, council tax, going out to eat, grabbing a drink. So I'm sure that you'd still save money in the long run if you lived outside of London and had to commute in, even with those high train prices. And what makes it even worse is that the wages here are extremely low, which makes no sense. Yes, of course, there are rich people here, as there are everywhere. But when I was job hunting, I'd say about 95% of jobs I saw posted were advertising to pay between 25 and 35,000 per year, which is just absolutely insane for the London cost of living. You would not be able to afford to live here on that salary unless you had multiple roommates.
So it sounds very similar to America, eerily similar. So, yeah, so if you are an American and you can't afford your current lifestyle, it's probably not in your best interest to decide to uproot from America and go to London and see if you could have a better style of living there, because it's pretty much 1-to-1, especially if you're in New York. She was talking about pounds. Pounds are a little bit similar to the dollar, but not quite. I think the pound is more powerful than the dollar. But yeah, no, these are things that you have to consider if you're trying to expat in a place like London. You don't have to learn a different language, but you need to be pretty well off, which is why one of the main things that I'm pushing on this channel is being able to be self-sufficient. The amount of dollars you earn are based on the work that you input. So if you input a lot of work, then it'll result in you being able to actually afford this kind of living. That's the idea. I know it's hard to achieve. A lot of people may not be able to do it, but if you're watching this channel, you're probably already on the path of doing that. You already have that mindset of being able to put yourself into a position to actually do something like that. And that's one of the main messages of this channel. Being able to prepare yourself for the future. And part of that is watching videos like this and understanding your options. What options are out there globally, aside from where you're born, aside from what you've been raised to live with your whole life. Yeah.
And to piggyback off of this, for my second point, the public transportation is extremely expensive as well. I just talked about how amazing and efficient it is, and it really is. I'm not denying that, but it comes at a price. If you want to buy a monthly transportation pass for zones 1 to 3, so not even covering all of London, since London has 9 zones, it would cost you £184, which is about $234 US. That is insane. My brother-in-law lives in Madrid, and his monthly pass costs him €8, which is just under $9. Like $234 compared to $9, and that $234 doesn't even include all of London. So if you live further out than Zone 3, it will be even more expensive than that.
So it seems like there's like different parameters based on how much you want to pay in London. In New York, you just need to get a Metro card and you could pretty much cover all the 5 boroughs that you want to go to. And she just mentioned Madrid, which is Spain, I think. And you only need $9 to cover what locations you need to travel there. So it may be of interest to look into considering expatting to Spain, if you're interested in that. You would have to learn Spanish though, or so they say. Okay, let's continue.
When I lived in Prague, it was €30 a month. So again, comparing to other cities in Europe, it is just off the charts expensive for its public transport. Next, we have the weather, and I guess this is dependent on where you're moving to London from, but I'm from LA. I'm used to very warm, dry weather, and most places I've lived around the world have also been very warm because that's what I like. Coming here is just colder, darker, and wetter than I ever imagined. We moved in the summer, and that was lovely, and thank God we did move in the summer so I can fall in love with London before November hit, because Ever since then, I've just been so cold. The sun rises past 8 a.m. and sets at 3:45 p.m. It rains every other day. The sky is always gray. The highs are between 35 and 38 degrees, so it's just really, really difficult, especially if you're from a warm place like I am. Just know that it will be more difficult than you think adjusting to consistent bad weather.
Yeah, no, that's the one thing that I hear about London. It's always raining and cloudy. But the other thing that I hear about London is that they don't have air conditioners. That's the one thing. Can someone confirm this in the comments? Do they usually have places that have air conditioners, or is that a myth? Because I've been seeing all over Twitter, whenever it reaches, 80 degrees, then you start suffering in London. And the thing about London is it's supposed to not usually get that hot, so they don't have the air conditioners considering that. But, let me know. There may be someone who knows better than me. I think when I was in London, I was staying in a place that actually did have air conditioning. So, it wasn't that bad. And, yeah. They always say, for every country that talks about their winters, they always say it's bad to visit in the winter. So I think that's a pretty common sentiment to have.
Next, we have how challenging it is to find an apartment. I have an entire video dedicated to this topic and advice I would give other first-timers. So if you are thinking of moving here, please check that out. I really, really want to help you. I don't want you to be like me, where I was just super overwhelmed and frustrated by the entire process. It's unlike anywhere I've ever lived before. Apartments get posted online and they're gone within an hour. Like, people are having bidding wars on rent prices and tenancy links. It's just so insane, and it's a huge con to moving here in general for the first time, but I guess just living here in general too, because eventually you might want to move apartments.
Yeah, that's pretty much the same thing here in New York City. Apartments go for sale and there's huge bidding wars. It's always a struggle finding a fitting apartment, especially with how expensive things are here. So yeah, it's pretty much a similar situation here. London wants to be New York so bad. All right, let's keep going.
Kind of piggyback off of this point, the apartments are much smaller than what you're probably used to in the US, unless you're coming from New York or maybe even Chicago. But the apartments here are tiny, unless you have a huge budget, of course. Then I'm not talking to you, but they're probably not going to have the amenities that you're used to either, like air conditioning, which honestly you don't really need except for a few really hot days in the summer. A dryer, so you have to hang dry all of your clothes, a dishwasher, outlets in the bathroom, built-in closets. So it's just a different way of life, and I'm putting it in the cons category because of the size that you get for the price. My 400 square foot apartment is $2,200 US.
Okay, that is abysmal. But yeah, I guess you just sort of confirmed the air conditioner thing. Why don't you guys have air conditioners? If it's now starting to get to those hot days, like I feel like y'all got to start, investing into some air conditioners. But yeah, she's pretty much saying, if you come from New York, you probably are already used to this style of living. For an expensive apartment, you get a pretty small space of living, which, it is what it is. If you're from New York, this might be good for you.
And lastly, I'll end it with the same con as any other big cities. Some spots are super touristy or even dangerous. London is very much a city that has a few pockets of beautiful, nice streets, and then right next to it is a few pockets of dirty, sketchy streets. It's very rare that an entire borough is just amazing, beautiful, and clean like Chelsea. So you really have to do your research and go check out places you want to live, not just the borough, but the actual street and the area. Make sure it's one of the nice pockets inside of that borough. And also just in general for safety and night, even if you don't live there, make sure you practice your normal precautions and just stay safe.
So about that. The thing about America is when we have dangerous areas in America, you got to worry about, a bullet flying in your face. When it comes to London, since, guns are pretty much banned in all of Europe, you got to worry about knives. So it's sort of like, pick your poison. Do you want to get shot or do you want to get stabbed? It's very rare you're going to have a completely perfect scenario for yourself. That's why I don't always want to paint the picture that things are always good in one country versus another. There's pros and cons to any situation that you're living in. So, just pick the one situation that you want, that you think would suit you the most. There we go.
What do you think? Do you think that the pros outweigh the cons or vice versa? Let me know in the comments down below.
Yeah, so that's pretty much it for that video. But yeah, in my in my short time traveling to London, it did look like a nice location, but compared to other UK countries or UK areas, I think there are more better suited locations to for me personally, that I think I would prefer over London in itself, actually. And the countries that make up the UK consist of England, uh, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales. And I only visited two of those countries. So if you want to go to an English speaking country, those are sort of your main options. But most all other countries in Europe, they're speaking English. Uh, but as I was saying earlier in the video, those countries come with other stipulations that you might have to consider. But yeah, I think that's it for this video. Let me know. There's probably a person from London watching this video right now. Would you recommend people expatting to London, or is London a no-go for now? Because people want this kind of information. People are looking to change their situations and change their environments. So looking, whether it be, you're trying to move there now or trying to move somewhere in the future, I think this is all information that is very important to know. And if you guys stayed to the end of this video, just let me know your thoughts in general, okay? And if you like this style of video, if you like these videos, please leave a like. It is muchly appreciated. And thank you for watching to the end of this video. And if you like this content, subscribe. And if you like, my channel personality, you don't even have to like solo traveling. You can just, like me for my personality. That's also appreciated. And yeah, that's it. And if you like this girl that I reacted to's channel, her channel will be linked in the description. And I hope you guys have a good day.